When I was around 25 years old, my therapist, the wise and empathic Al Weinstein, pointed me in the direction of a little PBS series called Joseph Campbell and the Power of Myth. Another wise and empathic man, Bill Moyers, the host of the show, brought into my and so many of our lives a revelation in the shape of Joseph Campbell. As I watched the show, I had the feeling that I had been struck, awakened, walked through a portal. Campbell's way of looking at our shared stories, really our shared humanity, opened a door to a secret passage to the meaning of life that felt both rationally and spiritually true, beautiful, and good, as the ancients would say. I was forever, ever changed by this glimpse into the eternal realm of archetypes and myth. As I've spoken about before on this podcast, 2 decades later, I went to grad school at Pacifica Graduate Institute, which was and is awash in both mythology and depth psychology, of course, the psychology of the unconscious. And a good part of the reason I went there to study was because, well, it had Joseph Campbell's archives. I mean, Campbell was a mentor to the founder of Pacifica, Stephen Eisenstadt, who I also interviewed for this podcast. But Campbell's books, his marginalia, his swimming thoughts and connections of ideas with stories and philosophies spanning the globe and human history are nestled in a tiny chamber that feels more church than library. And it is there for keeping safe and, of course, use by scholars. Heady stuff. In fact, so heady that during the first time I spent time inside of that little church with all those books with the archivist, my head felt cloudy and spinny, like I had just taken a large dose of something. And I had. It was the power of myth. While studying at Pacifica, I was ecstatic that 1/3 of our curriculum focused on and unpacked the power of narrative in service of bringing meaning and healing to our own lives and to those we would be in service of. We used our personal mythology coupled with our creativity to unearth and express the truth of our lived experience and connect the dots to the larger healing and stories of humanity. Those 2 years changed me forever. I picked the counseling psychology program, even though I really wanted to do the myth program, but my pragmatic side wouldn't let me go there fully. And even though I did not become a therapist in the end, like many who do actually become therapists in the program, the lenses of Jungian and post-Jungian psychology have been essential to my own healing and discovery of my path to understanding and deconditioning myself, as we say, becoming individuated. And just as essential, or even more, was the curriculum coupled with the study of myth with my personal storytelling. Because of both, I eventually developed a path to my life's work, to understand my journey of coming home through writing, storytelling, and now through my mystery school program where I teach others to discover archetypes, myths, personal power through story, and the deep imagination, so that we can all lead more truthful and authentic lives. So I am very, very excited and honored to be joined today by my guest, who is someone who gets what I speak of and when I talk of all of these things, because he too has found a path to weave soul making with all of these elements. Today, my guest and I will explore the broad themes of healing and individuation and a few other mythic, archetypal, and more pedestrian themes that we humans all struggle with, among other things, looking through the lens of one of the oldest narratives we have, the Odyssey by Homer. And luckily, he is a steady guide, my guest. He comes in the shape of someone called Phil Cousineau, and his new book is called The Wisdom of the Odyssey, 24 Life Lessons from Homer's Epic, which really unpacks the ancient poem in a fresh way for modern seekers of truth, beauty, and the good. Phil is an award-winning writer and filmmaker, story consultant and editor, travel leader, and inspirational speaker on myth in the modern world. His lifelong fascination with art, literature, and history of culture has taken him on many journeys in many realms. He lectures frequently on a wide range of topics, from mythology and film and writing to beauty, travel, sports, and creativity. He has published, this man, over 40 books and has earned 25 script writing credits. The omnipresent influence of myth in modern life is the thread that runs through all of his work. Welcome, Phil, to Humans on the Verge.
Wonderful to be back with you in the long conversation that started, somewhere back in the Paleolithic caves.
Yes, it did. And I believe it was at Pacifica. You were there for a creativity weekend or something, and you were blowing our minds and helping us to step outside of the small boxes we put ourselves in.
I remember that day. That was marvelous. We filled the amphitheater, and I think I even challenged all of you to come and sit in the hot seat, right? And talk about what's burning in your hearts, what is unbirthed yet in terms of your creativity. So yeah, I've been living with this all my life. And this new work with Homer's Odyssey has suddenly become more timely than even I dreamed of when I began. So let's start anywhere you want to plunge in. This is a universal story that's been with us for a staggering 3,000 years and has suddenly become revived. How do these things happen? Let's talk about that.
It's so magical, as I know it would be. And yeah, so when did this story first abduct you?
Good verb. We will play with synonyms for that because we get in trouble with some of those martial verbs. Okay, so my story within the story within the story, a metaphor I can use advisedly because that's how the wonderful Italo Calvino, the great Italian novelist, essayist, and so on, he has this beautiful short 3-page essay on the Odyssey in which he asks, which Odyssey are we talking about? Are we talking about the one that began sometime around the Trojan War, roughly 3,000 years ago, or Homer's own Odyssey, or perhaps the poet known as Homer, or the woman who wrote as Homer, or is it the medieval Homer, or is it the filmmaker's Homer? I just recently found, after the book came out, of course, a wonderful, startling 4-minute film made in 1905 by George Méliès. If you know the history of film, he's responsible for that wonderful piece about the voyage to the moon, in which the rocket ship hits the eye, actually very Cyclops-like, now that I think about it, of the man in the moon. And it's 4.5 minutes long, and it's Odysseus washing up on the shore of Calypso's island. And here comes Calypso out of her cave, dancing around. Why would I even refer to that? Why is that important? Because this was the bridge moment in between a few years of experimental documentary films, and then some filmmakers like Méliès began to say, why not tell a story? Why not tell a story? And where does his mind go? Where does his imagination go? 2,700 years back to the actual writing contemporary-wise of this. Why? Why do we keep going back there? So just the quick backstory, which is fun. It's a fun way to get into this. We have to be entertained with this. I grew up in a house outside Detroit, Michigan, in which we loved books. There were books everywhere, magazines, newspapers everywhere, and sports, baseball. I'm watching the Tigers one afternoon. The television goes on the fritz. Do you remember that wonderful old German phrase, on the fritz? Yes. And there's my dad trying to work the rabbit ears. Remember the rabbit ears? Yes. And he couldn't fix it. So he dramatically, arms akimbo like this, says, Philip, help me. And we dragged the television through the living room, then through the kitchen, to the foot of the stairs into the basement, and he kicked the TV down into the basement. And then he turns around dramatically and says, now we're going to read together as a family. And we spent the next, I was about 10. We spent the next 4 or 5 years reading books out loud, Friday, Saturday, sometimes Sunday.
Wow.
And we began with the classics, a YA version, a beautiful book of the Odyssey. And we began to graduate to Grimm's fairy tales, Huckleberry Finn, Tom Sawyer. And so this got into my blood. The stories into the bloodstream. Psychotherapists will tell you they know, usually within minutes of working with with adults and then with children, how exposed they are to deep story. Deep story. That it's much easier to work with a psyche that has grown up around stories, riddles, humor, like you did, newspapers and magazines. And then flash forward after I graduate with a degree in journalism from the University of Detroit. I go to Europe, I play ball, I'm there for a few years, and I get a chance to go to Athens. My first night in Athens, the tanks are in the streets. There's what we call tear gas everywhere, and I can't get to my hotel. So I'm looking around in Syntagma Square, if you know the center of Athens, and I look up at the Acropolis, and I see the Parthenon before the golden lights were ever put up. And I'm thinking, it would be safe up there. I'm going to go up there. There were no guards, no fences, nothing to keep me from sleeping all night inside of the Parthenon. You talk about soul-shaping moments. And it's also, and of course, it was spectacular. And I'm only writing about it now years later. But what that means is I was given a gift when I grew up of the books, loved the books, but then my father had a great pedagogy. We would read, let's say we were reading the Odyssey and the Iliad, and then we would get in the family car, the old Ford station wagon, and we would drive to Toledo or Buffalo or New York City and spend the weekend at MoMA because he found out there was an exhibition on Greek sculpture. So I grew up with this kind of binocular vision: read, travel, study the art of what all these stories represent. And in some way, I have lived this out. I'm a filmmaker with really almost 50 credits. I've worked on 50 movies, usually, most often as a consultant. What is the myth? What's the story behind the story behind the story? And I have to pinch myself. Warner Brothers, you're going to fly me down to LA for a weekend so we can talk about the myth behind The Matrix or the myth behind Wonder Woman or Superman? Oh my God, this is what I was born for, right? And now, for almost 30 years, I've been leading groups to Greece in the footsteps of Homer, 10 years or so in the footsteps of Odysseus and Penelope. Because it's women who are now breathing new life, as Camus once said, we have to with the myths, breathing new life into these old stories and making us think, where were the women? What role did they play? So let me finish with this tantalizing little tidbit here. See where we go with this. So often, because you're in LA, I'm in LA several times a year. This is Hollywood, the dream factory. The Iliad and the Odyssey were told in what I think of as dream palaces. It was the aristocrats who had the money and the power to call in someone like a Homer to say, now, would you tell us over the next 3 nights the story of the Odyssey? With that background, you would think that Homer's story was the stereotypical Western hero full of testosterone, going out to slay dragons, or in this case, the Cyclops, and not needing nobody. As John Wayne says at the end of The Searchers, I don't need nobody, right? But instead, with my reading, the writing and the reading of the wisdom of the Odyssey, I came across a startling conclusion or surprise. Tell me what you think about this. Odysseus is not driven home by dint of sheer will, like Nietzsche would say. And it's not even his crew members, all the male friends, the male soldiers around him. They always fall asleep. Every time they fall to seduction, which is one of the big themes in Homer. Beware of seduction. But instead, it's 5 women, 5 female forces who help Odysseus get home after 20 years. It's, of course, Athena, who's the embodiment of wisdom. It's Penelope, who I believe it's her love that pulls him home. It's not something sentimental about going back to Ithaca. It's passionate love, sensuous love in Homer. Calypso, Circe, Nausicaa, And even Eurycleia, remember, she's the nursemaid who nursed him when he was a boy. And then she's the one at the very end of the poem, and also in Nolan's movie rendition, who recognizes the scar. And this is deep psychological stuff. You know, someone you and I admire a great deal, James Hillman, wrote an entire essay on the scar of Odysseus called the Ulysses Healed Wound, something like that. And in there, makes a startling statement that helps me grok. Remember that verb we used to use in the 60s? Grok the Odyssey. Because this is not a story of a man, a sailor, a navigator who just got lost because he's a lousy sailor. He's lost for 10 years because he lost his soul. He lost his soul in war. He also betrayed his own ethics a few times. He looted. He was involved, not directly, but he allowed his men to rape and plunder. This causes deep, deep wounds. So one way that I conclude a couple of my chapters is by saying, and I'm trying to play with the lustiness, which is humorous, but also very, very real in terms of war. Penelope will not welcome him back into her bed until he's healed.
Yeah.
If he returns, like so many soldiers who say, I'm not going to tell you, sweetheart, what happened to me in Vietnam or Normandy or Nagasaki or these days Afghanistan and Iraq. No, I'm a man. I don't need to talk about these things. In this book, which is 50% dialogue, is 50% of people telling their story and then somebody listening. It's one of the great listening books. You have no stories unless someone is listening. That's at the core of psychotherapy, isn't it? Which is
Truly
the healing of the soul. Someone tells a story, but someone else has to listen deeply.
Yeah.
To me, this is part of the genius of the Odyssey.
Wow, Phil. Wow. Like you just hit on like 5 big, nice little nuggets there that each could be a book. And I love it. I love it. And really one of the things that my mind always does is I'm always looking through the lens of, how is psyche speaking to us now? Like what's showing up in the zeitgeist and psyche is presenting to us. And, boy, we're in it here in 2026, mid-2026 recording this with, 10 years into an extremely strange political era in America, a lot of cultural shifts happening around gender and the balance between masculine and feminine and the culture wars, on full throttle. And of course, having 20 some odd years ago started at Pacifica and really started to understand the ultimate dialogue between the masculine and the feminine, studying Jungian psychology and being a woman, and I'm wrestling with my inner masculine and men are wrestling with their inner feminine, and then all the people in between, the theys and the she's and the he's and all of that. I mean, we're all wrestling with these energies, these archetypes. And your take here on the healing, like this 2,700-year-old gathering of the stories and how they've been knitted together for what we have of them. But really seeing, even then, they were wrestling with these powerful archetypes. And I think about so much of what's going on in our culture right now as a deep reckoning with the wounded masculine. Yeah.
Beautiful. Oh, you're edging up to something I hope to talk about with someone like you, because besides reading all the major translations, I've also read for leading my tours, also writing shorter essays, and now the book. dozens and dozens of papers on everything from the masks and the disguises that are so prominent in the Odyssey, the use of weapons. There's so many portals and windows to deal with. The one I've never read about yet is, I address this a bit in my book, the mystery of how in book 1 and 2, Penelope, the wonderful queen, the weaver, her name means a weaver, all 5 of the women I'm describing who are healing and pointing Odysseus in the right direction, they're all weavers. They all work with thread, which is a American Sign Language for soul.
Mm-hmm.
The fates spin thread. It's a great, great symbol for how deep of your life, how deep your life is, how it's governed by the gods and the goddesses, and how they have the power to snip that thread at any one time. So threads is soulful. In the book, one of the great mysteries is Penelope comes downstairs and says, "Stop whining, Telemachus. I know there are 108 men here and none of them live up to your father. And we have to be careful because they could hurt you if you insult them. So now is the moment." And I remember Joe Campbell telling me about this. Around between 17 and 20 in those years, the exact age of Telemachus, comes the moment, go seek your father. And it could be literally your father, or it could mean go seek a strong male presence somewhere. Go play ball because you could get a really soulful coach. Go play guitar, and maybe your teacher is a way for you to learn how to become a man. And so he goes off on the ship to meet Menelaus, who's in all the he's great in the new movie. Nestor, who isn't, but he's considered the wise Nestor. The curious note here, to really come full circle into your beautiful point, is that Penelope also sends the family counselor, whose name is Mentor. In Greek, mentor means mind maker. The mentor is not a guru. The guru says, we have this tradition that is somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 years old. Trust me, sweetheart. Just do what I do. Meditate like I do. Wear my photo around your neck. Now, I don't want to mock it, but that's a very different tradition for very different people for maybe up to, some say 9,000 years ago, because that's when the Vedas would have been constructed. The mentor tradition, I think, is what helps give birth to the Western tradition of individualism. The teacher gives you information. Maybe if you have a really great professor in college, will help you shape that into knowledge. But that's still not what this is about. The mentor is there to say, what do you think? How do you feel? I'm here to help you, give you to the courage of your convictions. I'm here to help you make up your own mind. When I teach young kids, both in baseball or basketball, or teach them myth, oh my God, they go wild when they hear this. Nobody in the culture is saying, I'm here to help you make up your own mind. So this is one of the first life lessons in my book that is so special because, and it's not just the teaching, it's the fact that Homer, we don't know why, but mentor is sometimes literally the male, tall male, probably with the long hair and the long beard and the tunic. He's the man, but sometimes mentor is Athena in disguise.
Yes.
It goes back and forth through the whole book. And what I've come up with, and I'm speculating, but we are free to speculate. These are myths. There is no one interpretation. If someone says there is, call for a taxi. Get out of Dodge. Right? That's called fundamentalism.
Exactly.
And there is a kind of fundamentalism in myth, surprisingly, as well as in religion. So here's my theory. Please give me some feedback on this. Homer is saying, in times of crisis, in times of transition, a young boy trying to become a man, a young girl trying to become a woman, a midlife crisis, and later an elder's crisis. What do I do now that the kids are gone? We need a soul guide.
Yeah. Soul
guide is another way to talk about mentorship. But it moves back and forth. Homer is saying just women should just seek women, or men should seek men. By having mentors slip in and out, we call it how people are gender fluid now. This is history's first example of gender fluidity, but not in a political way, in a way that a great Maria Gambittos would talk about this, or Jean Houston would talk about this. We need both. And that is slowly, over the course of the first 4 books of the Odyssey, is how Telemachus transitions, so to speak, from being a whining, sniveling young boy to someone who can now stand up to the suitors and prepare to meet his father. Does that read well? Does that read well to you?
Yeah, it really does, Phil. And that that sense of one's free will, or one's sense of self, and utilizing your own autonomy and agency finally as an adult, whether woman or man. But it is that interesting thing that, you have to turn away from the parent who's got their own generational trauma passed down to you and turn to someone outside of your of that family dynamic who sees you differently too, and who sees into your potential. I love that. Absolutely. It totally tracks. And I love that thing where, even Athena, when I think about Athena, because Jean Houston, speaking of her, really is the person who kept bringing Athena to my lap, and I'm just starting to kind of find my way into that archetype and into a relationship with that imaginal figure. But, I kind of always resented Athena because it was she comes out of her dad's forehead, and I'm like, I don't want to come down. I want to own my, my feminine nature and all of that. But my dad, I get that I've got my dad's intellect and his rational side and all of that, but really seeing that she is this interesting keeper of the tension of the opposites of this for us.
Beautiful, beautiful. I would, as Angie Arian, you must know Angie's
love
work.
Her. Yes,
she had this great expression when we taught together. Phil, can I hitchhike on that point?
Love it. Yes.
She was so sweet that way. I really miss her. And when we would talk about the myths, the way that we dealt with that, and now I've developed it in my new book here, The Wisdom of the Odyssey. Wisdom as in gleaning meaning.
Yep.
It's like looking at the film. It's a spectacle. It's one of the great spectacles probably in movie history. But I have to question the depth. All spectacle in its origins, in its roots. As your dad was a wonderful word lover, right? A lot of etymology books in your house, if I remember right.
Absolutely.
Spectacle means surface. The more you emphasize special effects, or in this case, IMAX footage of the Trojan horse, IMAX of the tiny ship on the tempestuous sea, we will never forget these. These are what some scholars call mythologems, a wonderful word. I want to try to revive what it means. It's an image like Excalibur from the King Arthur stories, or the Trojan horse from the Odyssey. You don't have to over-explain them. They mean exactly what they look like.
Yes.
Like Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch of the West on her black bicycle, spinning past Dorothy's house, if you remember, as she's going to Oz. The mythologems are important. But what I want to know, and I think you did if you studied depth psychology, what does it mean? What does this really mean? What image are you giving me here? Are you just spinning this down? Am I getting one more, in this case, some patriarchy shoved down my throat? Or, so the way that I respond to this, I asked Joe Campbell, my mentor, about this in 1984 when we were shooting the first bit of the hero's journey. And I just started teaching at AFI, probably not too far from where you live. And I'm bringing myth in movies, myth into the movies. The course was called Myth, Dream in the Movies. And I would help students see that underneath Apocalypse Now is Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, and underneath Heart of Darkness, Homer's Odyssey. The Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum once does not want to tell his kids European fairy tales. He goes all the way back to the Odyssey, and he tells the story of Dorothy from the girl's point of view and Americanizes it.
Yeah.
It is so fun. It's so soul satisfying, if you will, to find the story behind the story behind the story. So I told Joe, most of my students love this, but some of them, they just fold their arms. They say, I just want to know how to sell a script. So what do I do with them? Now, here's the kicker. Joe says, we can't worry about those people. Let them find their stories, their structure on their own. And he says, I got my way of teaching this from my female students at Sarah Lawrence.
Yeah.
I said, I taught 38 years, not young men, but young women. And you know what they would love me for the first week and a half. And then one by one, my co-eds, right, would come up to me and say, Professor Campbell, you're so brilliant, but what does King Arthur mean to me now? What is Inanna, the Babylonian?
What's the point of this? Why are we reading this?
What's the point?
Yeah.
How can I use it now? Now, I love this phrase, for the living of a life.
Yeah.
That's how I have looked at the Odyssey for this new book, The Wisdom. What does it mean to me?
And I have to say that I went and typed out every single life lesson on a page. Like I just pulled them out of the book because just in that, when you look at that list, and there's 24 of them because there are 24 books, each of these things are so beautiful and really, they really are the nuggets. Like each one could be in and of itself, kind of the through line of a story somewhere. And the thing you just said and the three examples you just gave, this thing about returning home, the return, as we call it in the hero's journey, right? And you always look at the hero's journey, the little circle of it, and there's this thing called the return, right? And it's like this little section of it here, and it's like, wait. I mean, it's everything because I'm 63 now. And I've been really seeing, this whole thing that Jung talked about, and of course, all of the Eastern religions talk about, the first half of life is for going out and kind of conquering and doing all of your accomplishing and being driven by the culture and all of that. And then the second half of life is this, this wake-up call happens, and it's like, in the heroine's journey, it's the moment where you wake up and everything feels dead and not alive anymore, and you have to go into the underworld to renegotiate your relationship with the feminine and the masculine, and so this is my vote is that the Odyssey is actually the heroine's journey, as you said at the beginning, but for Odysseus, he's like trying to figure out how to renegotiate with this patriarchal greed, lust, murder, those three nasty things, and has to deal with these women, the feminine that has more power than him in the moment. And so therefore he has to renegotiate with that. And you're right about that, about Penelope not letting him into her, she's not going to let him into his bed until he has renegotiated with this. So, so this idea of coming home or returning to soul, returning to self, S with a capital S, Jungian self, is such the juicy meaning of this. And your book in particular really lets you feel into that because you walk us through the beats, like, yeah, here's the beats, here's what happens, like, oh, yay, great. And like what I do now is I read your chapter and then I go and read, hold on, I got to go grab her book. Miss Emily Wilson's translation of it because I saw her video and I thought anyone who wants to stand up and be Athena and speak, I'm all in. But and so I read your chapter and then I read the book in there, and it allows me to really see, and it'd be really fun to read like multiple translations then of this, to really get. To let it sink in even deeper with me. But this return, this home story, this is what I feel the collective human species is really grappling with now. Like, it is front row. We've got not only the front, my dad used to have a saying that said, when you're born in America, you get a ticket to the freak show. Or when you're born, you get a ticket to the freak show. When you're born in America, you get a ticket in the front row. And so we're really in it. We're really, really in it. And, but I really do feel that this coming home is what the species is going through. And if there's any meaning for this resurgence, thank you, Mr. Movie making Christopher Nolan, and then all of the energy around it, you and all of these people coming out of the woodwork with it, it's an exciting time to glean the wisdom in this. So yeah, that's my take on your take.
Oh, wonderful. So again, so much comes up. Thank you for evoking the word return. Many scholars that I respect believe that was probably the original title of what we now call the Odyssey. It's also helpful to know that Odyssey and Odysseus originally meant trouble. Odysseus is the fellow who's born into trouble and makes trouble. He's like the pig pen from Peanuts with a black cloud around him. He is born out of some kind of seduction. We know that. There are even some theories that say his real father was Sisyphus, not Laertes. So he's born clever, but also a troublemaker. And the famous debate that's gone on for so long, what does polytropos mean? That's the epithet. In Greek, I still prefer the original. It's a man of many twists and turns, which means that he's clever, but it also means it's got the echo of that wonderful word heliotrope, which means a plant that turns to the sun, or psychotropic. I bet you grew up with that word, which literally means the turning of the soul. We are taking psychotropics not just to get high, as it were, or low, as it were, but to turn our soul around from the darkness into the light. That is the story of Odysseus. He is in darkness because of being in war for 10 bloody years, savage years. And there's something in him that is polytropic. He needs, his soul is lost. He lost his soul at war. If you deal with veterans like I have, and even veterans who use our books to go back to Greece, back to the healing temples in Greece, to deal with Iraq, Afghanistan. A friend of mine, Dr. Edward Tick, is now taking Ukrainian and Russian soldiers together in the same conference to some of the healing centers. Why? Because the Greeks built 300 of these during antiquity. Not one, not five, 300. And they paid for returning veterans to go to these healing centers to heal the body, of course, if you're wounded, but to heal the soul.
Yes.
This is the real beginning of psychotherapy, the care of the soul. Now, one other thing, you brought up Joe and the whole idea of the hero's journey. What's usually forgotten, and your listeners, viewers, can go on to the internet after this and you can look up the hero's journey. You'll get these circles. 9 out of 10 of them are clockwise, which means, as my father used to say, it's bass-ackwards.
Yep.
Because the hero's journey is not clockwise. Tick, tick, tick goes the clock. Everything is in normal order. Everything is sequential and linear. All stories, all jokes, come to think of it, all folklore is counterclockwise. That's why you feel like time stops.
Yes.
It stops in love. It stops in art. I just watched the Odyssey, Nolan's Odyssey, again, three hours. It went by like 10 minutes. And I'm in a completely packed theater. It was like no one was breathing for those 3 hours. So the hero's journey, the movie journey, and especially the healing journey, that's where you and I overlap as well. It takes place somewhere in a numinous world. Joe called it the dream time. And I love the overlap there with what Hollywood has called itself for so many years, the dream factory.
Yep.
Where? Now, see what you think with this, because you are in the healing arts as well. There's this theory from fairy tales. The fairy tale world, Jack Zipes, Z-I-P-E-S, who's analyzed fairy tales that did not begin for children. They began as stories about youth and how we can be arrested or endangered or traumatized in youth. but they are for adults. And later you can simplify them a bit for kids. But it's really about the trauma suffered in youth. So he makes this case that makes a lot of sense to me. These middle books, 9 through 12, begin with, this is one of my life lessons. I hope you love this one. This is one of my 2 or 3 favorites. When Odysseus is finally allowed by Hermes and Zeus, and Calypso helps him build the raft. So he sails away, has a shipwreck, and he falls on the island of Scheria, which is modern Corfu. He is now in, I think, the world's first science fiction story. There are robots and animatrons all around this island. The ships that are so magical need no rudder or sail or mast. All you have to do is think about where you want to go. This is magic.
Yes.
This is a magical realm. And then, remember, he sits down, and this is so beautifully portrayed in different ways with the rapper in the Nolan's Odyssey, he's rapping and he's got the drum beat. What is a drum beat? It's a way of music that puts you into trance.
Yep.
We are healed when we move into dream time or into trances. So what happens now is the king and the queen, they want to entertain the guests. This is Xenia, the law of hospitality, Zeus's law. They don't know who he really is, but they know they have to feed him, give him drink, bathe him, anoint him. It's a very important word. Anoint him with oil. So now we know we're in sacred healing time. And then they bring out entertainment. And then the bard, a blind bard, and some scholars think this is Homer writing about himself, the blind bard, begins to tell a story. And then I have 2 illustrations of this in my book. It's one of the great motifs from all of art. Odysseus, the great warrior, Mr. Testosterone in the beginning, begins to weep. And what is weeping a sign of? Catharsis. Yeah. I think this moment is the birth of Aristotle's theory of catharsis. You hear a story, you see one, you feel one, and suddenly emotion, deep emotion is released and you're purified. That's Aristotle's word. Hearing a drama, watching a play, listening to a bard or a humorist cleanses you, but it gets better. Odysseus crying. The king leans forward and says, sorry, you're our guest. We were hoping to entertain you. Have we offended you? It's very sweet. It's so human, this little exchange. And Odysseus, with this glorious response, says, no, I'm not. I'm weeping because, pause, I'm missing this in the movie. I wish this had been in the movie. Instead, Odysseus tells all his stories to Charlize Theron as Calypso.
Yeah.
But in the book, he says, I am the man of whom you sing. My fame is far flung. I fought at Troy, but now, and for me, this is the linchpin of the whole poem. Now let me tell you what has happened over the last 10 years. And this is a moment when he, which learns a lesson most men never do. It hurts me to say this. He willingly transforms, not turns. Well, there's a turn again. He is the man of turns. Turns himself from warrior to storyteller. And at that moment, he turns his fate into destiny. When you and I begin to tell our stories, we're no longer victims of fate. We take our destiny into our own hands. And he tells stories that are preposterous. They're kaleidoscopic. They're hallucinogenic. What could Homer possibly be saying? Other than healing isn't rational.
Yes.
It doesn't take time. It doesn't take place on a clock. I'm going to put a stopwatch on you now, Carly. So let's talk about what happened. No, these things don't stop. It's outside of time.
Yeah.
It's outside of space. Does that feel right as someone who's been in the healing arts?
God, Phil. Well, it makes me tear up because the last however many years of my life, but after my dad died, I really stepped into telling my story, my personal story, my memoir, this is how I see it, and this is what happened. And this is what it felt like. And I have found, because I'd started doing that at Pacifica. I mean, Pacifica was really the place where Maureen Murdoch stood in the room with us, and we, worked with the myth of the hymn of Demeter, and we really walked into the heroine's journey. And this is where I got the full permission and the understanding of the healing potency of telling one story. And of course, like you said earlier, as therapists and as people who go to therapy, that's what they do. Tell me your story, And it's so beautiful when we are able, first of all, to make sense of what has happened to us, not in the way that we do it, that trauma does it, which is recycles it and punishes us over and over again and makes the world smaller and smaller. But when you have people who are willing to sit and listen, and that whole idea of hospitality throughout your book that you emphasize for us, it's always about, come in, tell me, where are you from? Here's some food. Let's exchange time. Here's space for you to be and to let me know who you are. So much of consumer society is in consuming outside everything, objects, things, and story too. They call it content these days for a reason. Yes, exactly. But we become, and there, and that catharsis happens certainly all the time with a lot of the story that we do consume these days. But so much of it leaves so little room for ourselves, so little room for us to be in our story, to see our story, to tell our story to others. And I just love that you seeing this scene there as that linchpin where like everything then turns, like the healing has begun because he goes from warrior to storyteller. My God, and I do a lot of dream work with people. I study with Stephen Eisenstadt, and we do dream tending and all of that. And this is why I love dream tending, because it puts you into that hypnagogic trance space that you get to have conversation with, the Hillman-esque conversation you get to have with the figures. And the story, when you do a dream tending with someone, part of what you're doing is you say, they'll tell you the opening of it, and then you say, and then what happened? And then they step into the next beat. And then what happened? And so you're helping them walk through the story of the dream and to see that it is this unfolding that goes on. And then, of course, what I love about that work is you get to step into other people's costumes and shoes within the space to look through their lens, their eyes of how they are seeing the story. So everyone gets to be a storyteller, including the figures. So I love that. I love that this is really, that healing and storytelling and having safety to tell your story is what maybe is the definition of healing.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Let's play with this now. How in the Iliad, the gods are influencing, some scholars will say 60, 65%. I hate to go into numbers too much, but it's fun here. The gods are constantly called upon. They're referred to as influencing. They are the source of your lust, your desire, or your rage. They will often, there's a wonderful scene where Helen is walking back and forth across the parapets of Troy in the Iliad now, and she's feeling terrible, responsible. It was me succumbing to the come-ons of the young prince, your son, Priam, Paris of Troy. And the king says, no, you were not the cause of the war. The gods were the cause. In the movie Troy, when Peter O'Toole plays King Priam, it brings tears to your eyes. There is so much dignity, nobility, but it's also a really respectful view of Helen, who through the Middle Ages was maligned constantly. She was called whore, prostitute, every savage epithet you can imagine. But scholars like Bettany Hughes, Emily Wilson in her translation, and me, I'm trying to revive the dignity of her role here. They're talking about the healing power of beauty. And now in the Odyssey, what I see happening anyway is significant for healers like you and me, storytellers. Rather than relying completely on the gods, remember, it opens with Zeus complaining, oh, those human beings, oh, they blame us for all their own follies.
Yes.
Now think about how many people we talk into, oh, if my mother had just remarried, or if my father hadn't been drunk. We begin to explain ourselves, which is very similar to how the Greeks are responding to the power of the gods. Yes. In the Odyssey, slowly but surely, over the course of 24 books, Odysseus and Penelope, who I think is on her own Odyssey, back and forth across from one room to the other in the palace there on Ithaca. It's shorter, but it's as profound and it's as soulful as his. So what are they doing? They are talking to each other, they're listening to each other, and waking up. That's one of the sublime messages of the Odyssey. Every time the crew, or even Penelope in the palace, or Telemachus on his travels, or Odysseus on one of the islands eating, or the crew eats the lotus. When you fall asleep, think of the repercussions of this. You fall asleep at work. You fall asleep. You don't really know what's happening in your marriage.
Yep.
You fall asleep and you don't know that somebody's embezzling your money in your business. This is Sufi wisdom. This is Gurdjieffian wisdom. It's depth psychology. Are you really awake? Are you alert? This is the first great book that talks about the difference between sleeping, waking, being alert. Being alert to what? Your soul.
Yeah.
And it manifests, I think it comes to fruition in book 23. So we've gone through the terrible horror of I call it the destruction of the suitors. It's still debated. Was this vengeance or was it justice? You know, they just had this acted out in Athens just a few weeks ago. Odysseus was played by an actor and he was put on trial by lawyers in contemporary Athens. Was this destruction justified? Or was he just back on the testosterone again? And because the Greeks they believe they gave us the first system of justice. So the Odyssey works this out. They're destroyed, they're dealt with. And now in book 23, I'll try to keep this brief, something utterly magical happens, at least for me. I believe that this is a love and war story. It's war, it's the repercussions, it's the aftermath of a savage war. A war that's still studied in war councils all around the world to this day. West Point studies the Iliad.
Wow. About
how to wage war after all these years. But the Odyssey is about the aftermath, coming home again, restoring home, which has always been an issue throughout human history. If you want to know why do people in Albania relate to this? South Africa, Asia, people the world over. Why? In one way or another, one time of our lives or another, we are exiled. We are driven from our homes. Our homes are destroyed.
Yep. Like
in the LA fires or the fires in France and Spain. How do you go home again if there's no home?
Yeah.
Everyone identifies with this. So we have this beautiful and very sexy, by the way, system of testing. Odysseus and Penelope are testing each other because being an imposter was a huge problem in antiquity. Especially if you've been gone for 20 years.
And it's such a huge theme in the book. I mean, it's like, it's endless, the impostering going on and him impostering and why is he and all of that. Yeah.
Self-protection. And this is part of the glory of Xenia. You had to have this ancient code of feeling welcome if you crossed a mountain to go to another village. If you were a merchant or a trader or philosophers, writers actually would travel thousands of miles to meet one other author, to meet a poet, to read a distant manuscript somewhere. So Voyages were everywhere. You had to have the sanctity. As Christopher Nolan says, it's the backbone of Greek civilization. So now we've come home. We're trying to restore peace here.
Yep.
Now, for me, this is the culmination of my book because I've read it. I worked on this so much. The two lovers reconcile. This is an important moment in drama, the history of drama, the recognition scene. And we still have them in romances, in our detective stories, in Westerns. Oh, I see who you are. It's still delicious, isn't it? The recognition scene.
Yep.
And now, as Lattimore, one of my favorite translators, says, and now they went to bed and they shared their delight in joy. They made love with joy. This is missing for me in the current movie, which is otherwise spectacular, but there's very little joy in it. And there is joy and humor and sensuousness here. But the best part that's missing, and it's what's the idea of you've got to condense, compress, and conflate. Conflate is the verb in filmmaking. 3 characters into 2 or 2 into 1. Nolan gives the storytelling completely to Calypso. But what's missing is the scene with these magical people on Phaeacia and also the final bed scene. Here's what happens real quick. They've made love. They've made peace. The servants are cleansing the banquet hall where all the destruction took place. And it's called catharsis in Homer. That's where the word comes from. And now Penelope turns to her long-lost husband and says something that, frankly, and I'm not being a smart aleck here, I think all men are longing to hear from their lovers, their wives, their friends. She says, come tell me of thine ordeal, for my heart can take it. She's implying, I know you've been through a lot. You were at war. It's taken you forever to come home. No, don't ignore me. Don't put me off. My heart is strong. That is enormous to me. For a male poet to put those words into her heart, into her mouth, and say that my heart can take it. So, frankly, like most men, okay, now I'm going to tell you my story, right? And he begins to spin the stories, and then something happens that I can play with this. Maybe, I'm guessing male authors forgot this for about 2,000 years. Now the man, the husband, the warrior, the hero comes home and he turns to her and he says, Penelope, sweetheart, what was it like to raise our son alone? What was it like to fend off 108 suitors who they tell you they're in love with you, but they want more. They want sex, but they also want our land. Yeah. They want the legacy here. How did you deal with them? And then, Kelly, he listens. He actually listens to her until dawn. This detail should not be forgotten. It should not be escaped, right? The husband and wife, man and woman, 2 lovers in any formation you want.
Yes.
They talk and they listen to each other. This is one of my life lessons in the book. You can't take this for granted. This is thousands of years before its time. It's an early form of both drama and I think psychotherapy, or drama and poetry is psychotherapy. Yeah. Does that feel right to you as someone who has worked in both?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think of, when we think of the depth psychological view of what it means, what psychology really is, which is tending the soul of the world, and the essence of this listening to each other and receiving, both being able to receive, that when we're really fully engaged, the 2 valences of the feminine and the masculine, when we're really engaged and present and undefended, then we can both give and receive. And that, one isn't in charge of that energy, the giving or the receiving, in some sort of in some sort of other kind of way. But yeah, and even thinking about, I think about we were talking about the vets and the PTSD and warriors coming back in modern times, and those circle of men that started healing each other and sitting in a circle and telling their stories. And, the metaphor of the circle holding them, the circle being the thing that invites and welcomes the learning of the feminine energy in each of them to be listeners and storytellers. And, it's so beautiful. It's all there for the taking. It's such a rich meal, all of this.
Yes.
And no wonder you have spent so many decades of your life continuing to dig a little deeper, or dig from a different angle, or walk away from it and then re-encounter this, because it really is like so many of these early ancient stories. They have all of the it's all in there. All of it's in there for us. It's just, do we want to take the time to encounter it? Because it really is. It is like an instruction manual in the end. And that's what that's why I love your book, because, person like me, I love reading the poetry. And, and the thing about this too is, like when I went to Pacifica and got to work with Dennis Patrick Slattery a lot, and we did Dante's Inferno together. And he said to us as we were unpacking it, he says, some things should not be read alone. Some things can only be read and understood in community. And that really hit me so much, and why I'd always loved English class, because we were always unpacking the story together, and our collective psyches were in the room unpacking it together. And so it's so lovely that we have all of these angles into it, and that we can unpack it collectively. And that's like what I said, why I love your book so much, because I do feel like I'm sitting in a room with you and you're unpacking it, and you've unpacked it for us. You've clearly have a very deep and long-term relationship with this work, and being able to be, okay, now I've got Phil, and Phil's kind of shown me some things and highlighted some things, and then I go back to the text, and then other things get lit up for me, and I can deepen and sit in with it. And then, of course, thinking about all of the Jungian and post-Jungian ideas and theory and philosophies that go with it. It's just, it's everything in my life. It's all of it. It's like, it's how I unpack everything. So this has just been just so luscious and just so lovely, Phil, to get to sit with someone who gets so lit up as I do about these things. Really, truly.
Gosh. Well, I live this. It's not an abstract study.
Yeah.
What goes in, especially into the life lessons, and I'm so glad that they move you, come from leading people to the actual sites for the last 35 years or so. I take groups to Delphi and I ask them to bring a question, like the ancients did. What is the deepest question in your life? And now we're going to ask it in situ, not at home. We're going to ask there in the presence of the goddess, as they used to say. I take my groups to what's called the necromanteon. It's the temple of the dead, which is where Odysseus enters into Hades. And for 1,000 years, they had rituals put. So your mother, your father died and you weren't there. You would pay the oracle of the necromanteon to make a paper mache model of your brother who died at war, or your parents who died when you were gone. And you could speak with the dead.
Wow.
Talk about deep soul therapy.
Wow.
When I take people to Ithaca, I take them up to the palace. I take them to the looming room of Penelope. And I ask the women to sit there. And I said, now look out across that bay. Imagine you are there looming you're at the womb. You're at the loom
of the loom.
Yeah. Looking out at sea, because you're 1,000 feet above the sea. Looking out, is my husband coming home? Can I see see the sails. And when I see and feel the responses to people at these sites, I know what works and what doesn't work. That's how I'm also able to speculate how Homer was traveling probably an entire lifetime, 40, 50, maybe 60 years, and polishing the stories like your father would have polished his jokes over years and years.
Of course,
and you learn
yes.
you learn to read the room.
You do.
Right?
You learn what works. Exactly.
You learn what works. So let me finish with this because it gets to the heart. Still, we can be a little abstract. All right, he's a great poet, and the Greek students had to read. They even had to memorize the Iliad and the Odyssey. Oh my God, why does it move me now? For years, I lived out near Golden Gate Park here in San Francisco, near John Lee Hooker's Boom Boom Room. The Great Bluesman. It's the title of one of his earliest hits, The Boom Boom Room.
Yep.
And I'm there because I needed a break from something I was writing, and it was really good just to have a beer, listen to some great blues. And in the middle of this one session, someone from the back of the room shouted out, John Lee, what are the blues? And then John Lee turns around and he has this fetching habit of talking about himself in the third person. We've all met somebody like that. So he tells his crowd, everybody asking John Lee, what are the blues? You know what John Lee tells him? John Lee says, and then he pauses. He says, the blues ain't nothing more than 3 minutes of triumph over sorrow. And to me, that cuts to the heart and the universal message of the Odyssey. This is a story about someone who's in deep, deep pain and causes pain in others. And he has to learn how to deal with the pain and the sorrow. Sorrow is a word. He sometimes calls himself the man of sorrow. It's like a great blues song or a country western song. This is someone who is singing about his own sorrow. And in the process, this is pure James Hillman too. Don't whine about the problem. Talk it out. Let the wound scar over. So this story in 24 books, I think, is reaching out to the Greeks of Homer's time, let's say the 7th century BCE, in which people only lived to about 30, 35 years old. Life expectancy was very low in those years. A world of constant warfare. Most people would never have known a day of peace. Also, famine, drought, disease was rampant, typhoid, you name it. And so it was a daily encounter with death and sorrow. How do you get through that? I think the same way we do now. I believe, and I try to recap my book, The Wisdom of the Odyssey, in triumph, not going backwards and not trying to preserve all this in amber like a beautiful piece of jewelry. No, This is living, pulsing truth that through our art, Kelly, through our art, our paintings, our plays, our music, our humor, our stories, we teach ourselves and then each other how to heal from a lifetime of sorrow. In the end, it's triumphant. Like that, they just in the last few years, they found the missing manuscript of Viktor Frankl. Remember his book?
Wow.
The Meaning, right? In which he describes what happened with him in
Man's Search for
Auschwitz.
Meaning. Yep.
The Man's Search for Meaning. Recently, they found a missing manuscript. And the title is called Yes to Life! Exclamation point. Why? Because he tells a story in here about how there's monsters who had captured all of them, put them into the camps, would sometimes send them out on marches and do nothing, just march in the snow for 6, 7, 8 hours. How do you deal with that? The indignity, the death. Frankl said, we had a song in Yiddish that translates into English, which the Germans wouldn't have understood, so they could sing it.
Yep.
And in English, it translates to yes to life.
Wow.
I think that is the genius. That's the brilliance of the Odyssey. Again and again and again. Odysseus and us and Penelope, day after day after day in the palace. She isn't giving up. She isn't succumbing. She is saying, Telemachus is saying, Odysseus is saying, yes to life.
Well, I cannot think of a better ending to this conversation. Beautiful, Phil. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for this time we've had together today. It's very invigorating and just pushing all of my creativity buttons and all of my joy buttons also. Like really like so beautiful. And I think it'll be good food for thought for a lot of people. And for those of you who, are into the Nolan's movie, great, yay. Dig a little further if you want. And Phil, your book is so great for that. And for those of you who were disappointed with his movie, I think Phil's book is like medicine for you, basically, because you're going to be able to kind of unpack it in a different way. And hats off to Christopher Nolan. I mean, it's not easy to fucking do that, what he just did. I mean, no one, I have people coming and wanting to do a biopic of my dad. And it's like, it's impossible. It's impossible to do these kind of things, to take these things. So hats off to him. But there's so many ways. For each human being on earth, there is a different path to this story and to unpacking this story and to relating to this story. And one of the life lessons that really hit me, Phil, in your book is it says a book from book 9, which is what we talked about, book 9, when he gets to tell his story. Know when it is time to tell your own story, or the world will tell it for you. We never learn who we are until we find ourselves in a story. And that is it. So yes to life, and really find your story, tell your story, know that you're in a story and you get to rewrite it all the time. And you get to rewrite the past story too. Believe it or not, people, I tell you, it's magic. So Phil, thank you for bringing you and your incredible life experience and your academic and creative intellect here, but your heart and your soul. And I wish you so well on your adventures with this book and your adventures. You're off to Greece, I'm sure, later this year, are you?
In late September, leading one more tour in the footsteps of Penelope and Odysseus. And the response is so strong, partly because of the worldwide interest in the way that Nolan has done. Remember what Jung invoked, dream the myth onward.
Yes.
Don't just get stuck in the way it was told. Can you dream it forward? That's part of the genius of Nolan. So let's applaud him for that.
Absolutely.
And because of this interest, we are going to do another version of my tour next May.
Oh, good.
And I just love this. It's sitting around the fire. That's the beauty for me of your show. You are inviting us to sit around the Paleolithic fire and look at all those beautiful drawings up on the cave wall. And what do we see besides the cavorting shamans and the gazelles up there? We see something that I think cuts to the heart of all of this art, the human handprint on the wall.
Yeah.
And what does that say? I was here.
I was here.
I was here and I mattered.
Yes.
So let's leave the listeners with that. Leave your mark on the cave wall.
Love it. Well, thank you, Phil. And I hope to circle around and see you here or there soon.
Come to Greece with us.
I may.
All right.
Just a little end note here, because I wanted to share something I'm really excited about. It's been a big turn in my life, and it's my heart and soul. So if you've been listening to my podcast, this one in particular, Humans on the Verge, and probably my old one too, Waking from the American Dream, you've probably heard me mention my grad school, Pacifica Graduate Institute. Clearly a huge influence on me. It's where I studied counseling psychology, but really it's where I studied mythology, archetypes, dream work, and the depth psychology of Carl Jung, James Hillman, and a bunch of others. If some part of you lights up when you hear me talk about that place and you're curious about all that stuff, but really not keen on all that grad school entails. Maybe you'd like to join what I'm calling Kelly's Mystery School. So, mystery school. What the fuck goes on there, right? Well, it's a place where we explore things like dream work, how to work with archetypes and myths for our own healing and creativity. And we explore and play with the narratives of our lives, in order to free us from the inner stories and voices that no longer serve us. And really to empower all of us to step into the narratives and voices that really unleash our hearts and gifts into the world. It's a place where you get to freely acknowledge that there's more to our experience of life than what the modern, left-brained, materialistic, outcome-oriented, capitalistic Western society offers. And we get more than just an intellectual understanding of all of this stuff, but we actually learn practices and techniques. That's what I teach, that we instantly apply to our personal and professional lives so that we begin to feel more aligned with ourselves and less tied to the thoughts and beliefs that keep us stuck. I mean, at 63 years old, I'm always shedding a new fucking layer of this onion and finding more thoughts and beliefs that keep me stuck and small. It's a place where we learn to trust our bodies, trust the wisdom that shows up in intuitions and dreams and synchronicities. And really, ultimately, it's about learning to trust life, like life with a capital L. And it's a path that I've been on for a long time that allows us to, have an organic unfolding of our innate wisdom, talents, and really soul path. We explore the deep imagination where we establish a relationship with what I like to call the inner council of allies. But most importantly for me, it's a community. It's a community that welcomes and nourishes and sees our inherent gifts and humanity, our organic creativity and resourcefulness and our wholeness. It's a place where the stance towards life is that there's really nothing to fix. I gave up the whole idea of life coaching and striving and all of that stuff because, there is nothing to fix. There's no problems to quote unquote solve because we and life are not broken or in need of repair. But really, we're just all in different phases and flows of levels of awareness and consciousness about the stories and habits and aspects of the human journey that we're all on individually and collectively. So anyway, if this sounds intriguing to you at all, I invite you to click on the link beneath this video here if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're listening on a podcast app, you can go to humansontheverge.com/courses. And scroll down a bit to Kelly's Mystery School. Hit the button that says Apply Now, where you'll get to share a little bit about yourself and what you're seeking. And those answers will land in my personal or professional, but it is my inbox. And then I'll be able to contact you about possible next steps. And I don't mean that last part to seem like strangely mysterious, but hey, it is a mystery school after all. Hope to hear from you. Have a great day.